Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the SRP webinar, Soft Power, Islam and Religiosity, Glocalisation of Islam in Southeast Asia. My name is Dr. Muhammad Ali. I'm an assistant professor at RSIS, and I'll be the chair or moderator for today's webinar. This webinar is organized by the Studies in Interreligious Relations and Plural Societies program at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. This webinar is part of our ongoing attempt to understand the role and use of Islam in the domestic and foreign policy of the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Earlier this year, we organized a webinar on the same topic, focusing on perspectives from the Middle East. The webinar featured Professor Peter Mandeville, Senior Advisor for the Religion and Inclusive Societies team at the United States Institute of Peace, and Dr. Usama Al-Azami, Senior Lecturer at Oxford University, who provided their views on the instrumentalization of Islam for soft power and how this manifested through the vehicle of scholars and their relationship with the states. Today's webinar will bring the discussion to our region by focusing on Indonesia and Malaysia. It will explore how Muslims in our region are making sense of their identity and practice of their religion, given that contemporary Muslims are deriving their sense of Muslimness not only from an evolving Middle East, but also from the West, and translating various Islamicities into their own social and political context. The webinar discuss whether trends such as Salafism, Islamism, or even Sufism continue to be influential in this part of the world. So for this purpose, we are very privileged today to have two eminent speakers to share their thoughts and perspectives on these issues. Our first speaker is Dr. Noorhaidi Hasan, who is Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Studies at the Indonesian International Islamic University, as well as Professor of Islam and Politics at Sunan Kalijaga State Islamic University of Yogyakarta. Prof. Noorhaidi's research interest includes Salafism, Islamic radicalism, identity politics, Muslim middle class, religious diversity, and youth. Welcome, Dr. Noorhaidi Hasan.
Yeah. Yes.
And our second speaker is Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady, who is an assistant professor at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization at the International Islamic University, Malaysia. Dr. Ahmad is also Associate Fellow at the International Center for Counterterrorism and member of the International Advisory Committee at the Global Peace Institute. And Dr. Ahmad works closely with the Malaysian authorities on rehabilitation and de-radicalization programs. Welcome, Dr. Ahmad.
Thank you.
Both speakers will address the topic of the webinar for about 20 minutes each, and this will be followed by a question and answer session where participants will get a chance to engage or ask the speakers questions. May I remind that for those who wish to ask questions or give comments, kindly type them in the chat box available below in the Zoom facility. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to invite our first speaker, Professor Noorhaidi, to present. Prof. Noorhaidi, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Muhammad Ali. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Ambassador Alami and RSIS for inviting me to share some of my perspective and understanding about Indonesian Islam today in this very prestigious webinar. Yes, let me share my slides, yes, with you all so that we can understand better what we want to explore in this webinar. It is the slide. Okay. Yeah. One moment. Basically, what I want to argue today is that Indonesian Islam is in the final process of reaching a new equilibrium after being seriously disturbed by a lot of things happens over the last 30, 20 years. We still remember how bad was the threat by the rise of the radical, conservative, militant Islamic organizations like the Salafi, which established the Laskar Jihad, and then also the Hizb ut-Tahrir, which were actively calling for the Islamic Caliphate, and also Jamaah Islamiyah, calling for jihad in several troubled spots in Indonesia. We also still remember very well the mounting rejection against modernist and liberal, or at least progressive Islamic views that had until then found relatively broad support within the two largest Muslim organizations in Indonesia, that is the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah. We have also seen kind of conservatization in the fatwas of the Majlis Ulama Indonesia, the Council of Indonesian Ulama. They were attacking kind of, pluralism, multiculturalism, and so on in their fatwas. At least what we saw in the list of the fatwa issued like 15 or 20 years ago, and also the growing intolerance among Indonesian Muslim in general, as we understand from the surveys conducted by several study groups in Jakarta and other cities of Indonesia. Of course, there are many factors playing a role in bringing this new equilibrium, including, for instance, changing global, national, local context, as well as kind of political consolidation among religious elites in Indonesia, and also a systematic government strategy to handle the matter, and cultural resistance, growing cultural resistance among people at the grassroots. These are among the factors that play an instrumental role in bringing back the face of Indonesian Islam, which is broadly known as accommodative toward local culture, tradition, and so on. Before I elaborate more about this argument, this basic argument, actually we need to understand about Indonesian Islam. What I mean by Indonesian Islam is not something like rigid or something like fixed. Yes, this is something contested all the times. What I want to say is that actually Indonesian Islam is a contested project involving multiple agencies, let's say state actors, politicians, religious leaders, cultural leaders, civil society organization, societal force in general. All of them were involved in the competition to define the correct and appropriate definition and practice about Islam in the Indonesian context. So this is about the debate about what kind of Islam that should be practiced by Indonesian, should be referred to by Indonesian in their daily life and practice accordingly. So these all actors have been trying to engage in the debates and also propose their definition about the so-called Indonesian Islam. Actually, if we make it more simple, the contestation surrounding the Indonesian Islam is actually the competition between the so-called orthodoxy and heterodoxy, or orthodox fashion of Islam and heterodoxy, if we refer to the definition proposed by scholars about this issue, or high tradition and little tradition, if we refer to the concepts introduced by Ernest Gellner, for instance. Those who are defending their attachment to locality, to traditions, to plurality, and so on, they try to proposed the so-called heterodox Islam, and which is known as their accommodative feature toward locality and so on, like I said before. But their attempt to maintain to promote this kind of heterodox interpretation of Islam has always been challenged by the Orthodox version of Islam. This is because of several things happened in the history. So it is actually the contestation in general between the orthodoxy and heterodoxy, or high tradition and little tradition. And if we look at the history and the dynamic of Indonesian Islam, actually this contestation has a certain historical pattern. This is repetitive. This happens so many times in the Indonesian history. What we have seen, like I explained before, about the rise of conservative militant organization, attacking the moderate mainstream Muslim organization. That is not something new. It's already happened in the 16th century, 17th centuries, and happened again in the 19th century, early 20th century, and today it happened again. So this is kind of, there is a kind of certain historical patterns in the Indonesian Islam. And there are some historical ruptures that trigger this contestation. Normally, the historical ruptures are related to something happened at the macro level, at the global macro level, and also something happened at the national and more micro levels. Actually, we can somehow understand the situation if we read the thesis by Murray Klebs. Yes, Murray Klebs is an Australian scholar. Like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, he was affiliated with Asia, with the, what is that, in US, National University of Singapore. And over the last 20 years, he published 3 important books to consider, to understand the dynamic of Indonesian Islam. The first one was the book entitled Mystic Synthesis in Java. This is 2006. And then the second one, Polarizing Javanese Society. This was published in 2007. And the last one, Islamization and its opponent in Java. It was published in 2002. So this is basically a trilogy by Ray Klebs that probably help us to understand what's going on in the Indonesian Islam. So the story of Ray Klebs began in the 16th century and early 17th century when Sultan Agung in Mataram Kingdom tried to propose the so-called mystic synthesis in Java. He combined a Javanese element of religiosity with something more universal, that is let's say, Middle Eastern version of Islam. And this was initiated by the process of growing encounter, between Indonesian people at the time and people, traders included in it, who come to Indonesia, therefore for trading or for dawah or other reasons. So in the 15th century, they came to Java and to try to introduce the so-called more orthodox version of Islam. Before Islam had been already established somehow in Java by combining Hindu Buddhist element with the basic tenets of Islam. But this first, let's say, version of Islam in Indonesia, again, I would say, was disturbed with the increasing intensification of encounters between Muslims in Indonesia or Indonesian people at the time with those coming from other part of the world. So Sultan Agung tried to reach the first equilibrium, religious equilibrium in Java at the time by introducing Java calendar, for instance, and other wisdom that successfully maintains a peaceful picture of Indonesian Islam over 1 or 2 centuries at the time. But the first equilibrium that had been achieved at the time become disturbed in the 19th and early 20th century. What is the factors behind that? It was actually related very much with industrialization in Java. Colonial rulers, the Dutch at the time, brought so many traders and also businessmen from Europe, and then they started investing their money to develop plantation and other industrial business in Java, in line at the time with the Dutch colonial rule attempt to develop infrastructures and also open the isolation of remote areas in Java. This industrialization in the 18th century disturbed the first equilibrium that had been established by Sultan Agung. And then the disturbance of this equilibrium resulted in the rise of the rise of the sphere contestation between the Sukul Putihan and Abangan. Putihan refer to the white people. White people is a kind of santri, those who are more consistently and more committed to practice religious tenets and religious teaching, while the Abangan is referring to the term Abang. Abang is red, yeah? Those who are somehow reluctant to adopt Islamic teachings. They did not reject to be associated with the new religion, but they did not really want to apply the norms and also the ritual associated with the religion. And the sphere contestation between the Putihan and Abangan, both parties criticized each other very harshly. Like the Putihan claim the Abangan are only like, they are the candidate of the what is that? The inhabitant of the hell. And also Abangan criticized the Putihan. What Putihan did for the Abangan was a kind of something irrelevant, something not important for their life. So, but actually the sphere contestation at the time led to the rise of the Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah in early 20th century. And they came to the fore as the definer of Indonesian Islam. So the role of the Nahdlatul Ulama was very important at the time, and as well as the role of the Muhammadiyah. Muhammadiyah tried to be close with the Orthodox faith of Islam, while the Nahdlatul Ulama tried to be closer to the heterodox faith of Islam. But they somehow reached a common consensus in the middle. Yes, okay, heterodox version of Islam is okay, but not really heterodox. There is also some kind of the adaptation to the local context. As well as the Nahdlatul Ulama, they adapted the heterodox version of Islam, which is very local in character and so on, but they also received the elements of the orthodoxy. This is the second rupture happening in the Indonesian Islam. The third one, this is what happened over the last 30, 20 years. And the trigger was the globalization. We know that globalization facilitated the increasing ease of travel of people across the globe, and also the globalization introduced new media, digital technology-based tools that can be used for the Muslims' daily life. They now promote their religion or campaign their religion, not simply come door to door to convince people about their religions, but also they can use new media, satellite television, and then they can also use, recently, of course, we understand smartphone and so on, the internet, and this disturb again the second equilibrium that happens in the early 20th century. and this is very serious. I mean, the disturbance of the existing equilibrium was very serious, because the factors contributing to the disturbed situation at the time was not simply the globalization, and the globalization also facilitated the expansion of new transnational Islamic movement. Salafi, we understand, originally from Saudi Arabia, but if we talk about Salafism, it is not that simple. It is very complex, actually. Hopefully, I will have some time to discuss further about this. And the expansion of the new transnational Islamic movement reduced somehow the central importance of Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah. They were no longer the only definer of Indonesian Islam. They had now strong competitors, the Salafis and the other Islamic groups that claim to bring and introduce purist version of Islam, more authentic version of Islam. So we should understand within this context that what happened after the fall of Suharto. Suharto stepped down in May 1998, and the fall of Suharto, somehow served as a catalyst for the emergence of radicalism and terrorism in Indonesia. Some of the phenomenon have been related to the emergence of the new transnational Islamic movement that I explained before, the Salafism, Hizbut Tahrir, Jamaah Islamiyah, and so on and so forth, and also something home ground like Darul Islam, had been engaged as well with the jihad ideas, growing up in other part of the Muslim world, and then they were actively calling for the Sharia Islamic Caliphate. And in the Indonesian government only began to consolidate against radicalism and join the global campaigns after the first Bali bombing in October 2002. At the beginning, there was a kind of hesitation among the government agencies, the government people, policymakers, about the challenge of radicalism and terrorism. They sometimes, deny the threat, but after the Bali bombing, they realized this is a real, and that is why they consolidate themselves and introduce so many policies, trying to combine soft and hard measures to deal with the threat of radicalism and terrorism. And this has happened since 2002, and then continue during the Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono presidency, with some emphasis on the campaigns against terrorism. And our current administration under President Jokowi, which was starting in 2014, realized that the threat of radicalism and terrorism has been very serious, and this threat has been prolonged. That is why the government under Joko Widodo presidency tried to curb the room for maneuvers of radical groups. They, issued several regulation to ban conservative, militant, or radical organization in Indonesia, and they arrested some of the high level figures associated with the radical organization. And at the same time also, they try to intensify the campaigns for Wasatiyah Islam. This has been occurring over the last few years and still occurring in Indonesia today, with the Ministry of Religious Affairs as the main sectors campaigning for the Wasatiyah Islam. What I want to argue is that actually every time equilibrium of Indonesian Islam is disturbed, there is always a counter-cultural movement to emerge to bring back the equilibrium. Either because of the government attempts to challenge the rise of radical or military organization, or actually what I see, there is an inherent awareness among Indonesians at the grassroots to bring back the equilibrium when they feel that the presence of the more orthodox faction of Islam has been already disturbing their religiosity. This is what I observed when I did my research in Central Java, in Magelang, Muntilan, as well as in Dieng Plateau, in Wonosobo. In the beginning of 2000, I saw the significant presence of Salafi groups in that very Abangan area, yeah, on the mountain of Dieng, yeah. But when I returned to the same area around 2017, 2018, I did not no longer saw that kind of visible presence of the Salafi group there. There were still a few Salafi people living in that particular area, but the number of the Salafis very, very small, become quite small, yes. Some of them return to their basic understanding of Islam as practiced by most Japanese. And also the state has always played an instrumental role in defining the correct interpretation of Islam. Of course, various actors, like I said before, try to propose their definition on the true Islam or the correct version of Islam. But as long as the government did not try to intervene in that debate, actually there is no dominant party that can win the debate. When the government or the state try to engage in the debate, normally and side with certain group, and then they could win the debate, and thus accelerating the achievement of the new equilibrium. And we understand that Wasatiyah Islam is actually the government strategy to bring back the equilibrium in favor of Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, as well as other mainstream organizations. Yeah. Interestingly, the contestation to define the correct definition and practice of Islam in Indonesia happened not only among different religious groups. Of course, actors from different religious groups try to win the debate and the competition to support their own claim, but it is not that easy, because internal the group themselves, normally there have been so many debates and also the contestation. Factions, similar groups in one big group try to compete to win that in a certain kind of interpretation. So we can look at the situation, this phenomenon, at, for instance, the contestation between the Garis Lucu and the Garis Lurus in the Nahdlatul Ulama. Garis Lucu try to, challenge the interpretation of certain people in the Nahdlatul Ulama, which are close to the orthodox faction of Islam, let's say like that. But Garis Lurus try to challenge the Garis Lucu, saying that their interpretation of Islam is the correct one. This also happened in the Majlis Ulama Indonesia, the conservative and the progressive. I just read the data today. Among 36 people active in the Nahdlatul Ulama as the leadership of the Nahdlatul Ulama, 28 come from mainstream Muslim organization like Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, mostly from Nahdlatul Ulama, something like 23 from Nahdlatul Ulama. And also the competition among the Muhammadiyah Salafi and Muhammadiyah National. It is called Busa and Munas. It is kind of, sarcastic terms. What we have learned from the Muhammadiyah in line with the growing contestation among several groups in it, and also the Suri and non-Suri in Salavism. We cannot say that Salavism is a monolithic group. There are so many groups in the Salafis that are involved in competition and also in challenging the interpretation of the others. And this contestation would force each group or each faction in a group to negotiate. They negotiated. Yeah, of course they do not just propose their own interpretation without any giving any space for other interpretation. And this negotiation resulted in some hybrid expression of their religiosity. We can see the different kind of hybridities in the all organization, religious organization in Indonesia, in the Nahdlatul Ulama, in the Salafi, Muhammadiyah, and in other groups. So this indicate that the negotiation has happened to define the correct interpretation of Islam. I just want to take one example among the Salafis. I found these pictures in one of the websites run by a Salafi leader, and they put these pictures to describe how bad is the competition involving so many factions in the Salafis: Haraki, Yamani, Sururi, Turabi, Murji'ah, Salaf Ikhwani, and so on. What I want to say is actually even in the Salafi, among the Salafis, they achieve a kind of new equilibrium, yes, middle path, yes, and try to make them closer to the established interpretation of Islam in Indonesia. And if we follow the history of the Salafism in Indonesia, the first schism happened in early 1990s between Ja'far Talib and Yusuf Osman Baisa, and the competition at the time, the schism at the time also was get the background of the competition among the two leaders about the legitimate leadership in the Salafi. Who are the most legitimate? Who are the most authoritative to lead the Salafi movement in Indonesia? Yusuf Baisa, who had studied in Saudi Arabia, tried to say that he is the man that should lead the Salafi movement, but Ja'far, who came back from Yemen, tried to challenge the Saudi branch of Salafism in Indonesia. And the second Sikhism happened in mid-1990s. This was around the issue of Sururiyah. One group criticized the other as the follower of Muhammad Surur and Naib Zain al-Abidin, that involved especially Ja'far Talib and Abu Nida. Abu Nida before tried to bring peace, consolidate between Ja'far and Yusuf Osman, but failed, and he himself was becoming kind of the main actor behind the contestation. And also, connection with Saudi Arabian authorities or institution is very important here, with the possible funding they receive to support their dawah and so on. And this always play a role behind the contestation among the Salafi actors. The third one, after jihad in the Ambon, early 2000s, because the followers of Ja'far Talib feel that the jihad they had conducted in Ambon was not real jihad, was not really jihad. It was a kind of the manipulation of jihad by the elite, especially the elite associated with Ja'far Talib in that context. They criticized Ja'far Talib for manipulating the Salafi purity for his political end. And then Muhammad Umar As-Sewed, Luqman Abdu, and other Salafi leaders established their own, the so-called non-political Salafi groups. And this returned to the early mission of the Salafi to criticize again Hizbiyah, again political tendency, hierarchy, and so on, and even the jihad. And what I observe in the Salafism is actually what happened today is a kind of, we can call post-Salafism is happening among the Salafis in Indonesia, or at least we can still see soft Salafization is happened. But the soft Salafization is part of the group, bigger phenomenon that is what I call as post-Salafism. This is, of course, in response to the changing circumstances at the global, national, local level, global campaigns, again, radicalism, and so on. And because of this changing situation, the Salafis try to move to the center. Abu Nida and his allies adapted national curriculum in their school, wore more typical Indonesian attire, developed commercial business. They established like pengusaha Muslim group, something like that, established radio and TV station. Some former followers of Ja'far Talib also took the same steps, yes, to move to the centers. Like Zulkarnain, who is known among his contenders as the main actor behind MLM. They call Mutalawin, La'am, Makir, Mulabis. He also adopted the national curriculum in their school. That is because I think they feel this is the only chance for them to survive. No longer funding from Saudi Foundation, for instance, and so on. And also, interestingly, they were quite active in criticizing terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, Jamaah Islamiyah, ISIS, GAT, and so on. The Wahda Islamiyah, the most progressive faction in the Salafi, even echo Wasatiyah Islam. They also talk a lot about Wasatiyah Islam, and they engage in discussing the notion of developmentalism, citizenship. Even they talk about citizenship, they talk about democracy. So now they're becoming closer to the mainstream. This is what we found in the internet. Those associated with the Abu Nida, established or pengusaha Muslim among the Salafi, established Muslim distro, they produce this kind of product, yeah. They suggest this kind of product. Look at the t-shirt, Jenggot yes is Balno. But the way they what is that? They produce this kind of t-shirt is very interesting, and also other product that they establish, and also their performance in their everyday life when they perform their task as preachers. You know, this one, what is that? Viranda and Dirja, the first one. He has been frequently appearing on TV, Roja TV, and radio station and so on. And this one, Abdul Tuasikal, and the last one is Zulkarnain. Zulkarnain also appeared on TV and on radio and so on. This indicates that actually even the Salafis, the most conservative organization in Indonesia, they are now moving to the centers as a result of the changing situation at the global, national, and local context. This is what I want to share. Thank you very much.
For sharing with us an interesting presentation on the current dynamics of Indonesian Islam. May I now invite our next speaker, Dr. Ahmad El-Muhammady, to present his lecture, please. Dr. Ahmad, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad Ali, my co-panelists, Dr. Noorhaidi, Hasan, distinguished audience, dear listeners, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to thank the RSIS for organizing this important programs. I have followed the previous lecture that they have before, and I think it is very, very timely and very useful to, how can I say, identify the current trends of Islamic movement, and also the phenomena which is going on with the region and also in the relationship with other regions, Middle East. So the discussion today, let me share with you the slide. I hope that you can see this. Can you see? Can you see the slide?
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, all right, very good. So the subject of our discussion, I would say, based on the topic given, is the soft power, Islam and religiosity, the glocalization of Islam in Southeast Asia. So the key question is how Muslims in the region contemplate about religiosity and an identity, and how religion was used as soft power in the political arena. And is the recent shift in Islamic discourse in Middle East and the West have had any impact on Islam in our region? So I think this is the key question that I'm going to deliberate on over the next 20-25 minutes. Of course, as you can see, there is an ending debate and contestation on the role of religion in shaping identity and politics. And you also can see Islam is used as a soft power to shape political outcomes. And you also can see the role of Islamism, which is mean that using Islam as a political project, as described by Dr. Noorhaidi just now in the context of Indonesia, of various forms from extremism to legitimate political entities, and also the rise of political radicalization and violent extremism, the increasing case of Islamophobia, or the globalization of Islamophobia.
Dr. Ahmad, I'm sorry to interrupt you because you need to share your screen because you cannot see your slides properly presented.
Okay, very well. Let me share again Right, how about now?
No. You have not shared your slides.
Okay.
And to put them on the presentation mode.
Oh, I see. Okay, let me
And to click present on your screen.
Well, actually, I think I shared in my screen. Actually, it's not on your screen. Let me start again then. Can you see now?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think this is okay.
Can see now.
Yes.
All right, excellent. Please accept my apology for the glitches. Okay. So in this discussion, therefore, I'm going to discuss this from Malaysian perspective and experience. There are 5 key points that I would like to discuss. The first point is, I think the best way for us to understand this phenomena is to go back to look at the role of religion in human life. So that by understanding this, we can figure out what extent the role of religion is influencing the way we do things, either in personal and also in social and political life. So when we talk about the role of religion in human life, we can say that human needs belief system or spirituality to function as human. And as Muslim, we believe that being a believer, meaning that being a Muslim or believe in God is a part of human primordial nature that is fitrah. That is a research done on the Kevin Rounding from the Queen University, Ontario, his colleagues, who talks about the purpose of religion. And he said that to enhance the basic cognitive process of self-control, which in turn promotes any numbers of the valuable social behavior. I mean, he was talking from the sociological perspective, definitely. And there is another book written by Stephen P. Asma in 2018, talks about the role of religion in helping emotion regulation, the ability to assuage negative emotion, to bring about positive emotion more often, and it helps to repress libidinous desires that people can be more effectively serve the greater goods of the in-group. And religion also provides ways of understanding and appraising this emotion adaptively. And they give human aware of feeling like they have more control over what is happening, because religion definitely gives that kind of perspective. Because God on their side, and they give the world meaning by providing a cosmic narrative to the universe. So I think this is basically our relationship with religion or with God. But of course, we also have the counter narrative, which is somebody like Richard Dawkins, who wrote this book, very interesting book, The God Delusion. And he said that the supernatural creature that is God almost certainly does not exist. He does not believe it. And the belief that a personal God qualified as a delusion, meaning that he said those people who believe in God as delusion, which he defined it as persistent false belief held in the face of strong contradictory evidence. So based on the scientific evidence that he was talking about, he said that it is God does not exist. So when a person suffers from a delusion, we always call them insanity. But when many people suffer from delusion, we call religion. So that's how he described religion and the impact of religion in human life. However, at the end of it, we can say, therefore, human would search for belief system or the object of worship in their life. It is mentioned in the Quran, for example, Surah 6, 74 and 80 about the Prophet Abraham, who said in the constant search for God, and he finally found one. That is the unity of God, that is Tawheed. But people also can see how about atheism? Those people who do not believe in God or do not believe in religion. But actually, atheism is also a form of belief system because it provides someone with a kind of object of worship. And this could be the object of worship, could be material and non-material things. If you talk about a person like the Ocean Gate, the submersible ship recently, disappeared in the Atlantic Ocean. His object of worship is a passion to search for title. That exactly defines his life, actually, but it also brings to his end. So religion and spirituality move human activities and lead a meaningful life. So human also turns to religion during personal and global crisis to make sense of what is going on and to find consolation and explanation of the complex life events, especially in the age of crisis like today. We can see this in the case of the COVID-19 pandemic. American says that most likely the pandemic has made the religion faith stronger. They say this. And they agree that religion is very important and it has increased, and also in Spain and Italy and so on and so forth. So it is often, in my work, actually in the counterterrorism, I met with those people who are detained for terrorism charges. Crisis bring them to find God, but the version of Islam that we are talking about is actually an extreme one. I will explain this later. So we can conclude that religion plays an important role in human life. It is inseparable component and value. It shapes human life and provides meaning to human life. And it is also part of primordial nature that is people. That is number one point. The second point that I'm going to talk about, the Islam is embedded in the federal constitution. This is another point that I think which is related to the topic that I'm going to talk about this afternoon. If you look at the federal constitution, Article 3, it's clearly stated the position of Islam as the official religion of the federation. So therefore, Islam is inseparable component from the state body politics. So then we can therefore explain what's going on later in this case of the make use of Islam as the soft power in the context of relation with other states. And historically speaking, we also can see the role of Sultan and the Sultanate as the guardian of Islam. I mean, it has a very, very important role in Malay society. And demographically, we also have Muslim majority country, 60.3% out of 53.2 million, which has a demand to push for Islamic agenda. I think this is very, very important point. So therefore, if we have this kind of Islam as the agenda, is a natural outcome, I would say, of the socio-political system that we have in this country, as well as the historical. However, we're not saying that Islam is the only religion that has the role to play the Malaysian political discourse. We also can find some other religion has a certain role to play as well. And it has penetrated into the realm of politics. So therefore, religion can be a convergence point, meaning that it can bring people together, as well as also a conflict and tension. That is number two. Now we go to number three. We can see this manifestation of religiosity in which government injected Islamic element in the state policy and administration. We can see this throughout Malaysian polity, the state Malaysian polity. During Mahathir's time, we have the Islamization policy, in which Mahathir tried to introduce some Islamic element in his administration and also the policy. It led to the establishment of the International Islamic University and also Bank Islam and a lot of Jatin and so on and so forth. So this is the Islamic agenda become part of the government's policy. And it has been continued afterward during Abdullah Badawi's time. He introduced Islam Habari. And it has been trickled down to many levels of government, including to the grassroots. And during Najib Razak's time, we have One Malaysia, but it also has Islamic component in there. And recently we have this Anwar Ibrahim's introduced their Madani approach as part of his administration's guidelines. And it has been trickled down as well. I've been invited to speak on this. I will show this later on. So it became a very, very important agenda. And we can see this, it's not only in rhetoric, but also in practice. It is also interesting to see that the opposition parties also leverage on religion to win support. I think, as I said, because it is a sellable goods, a sellable commodity. So it is a natural reaction for them to offer something like this in order to compete for support. So the religious narratives could be, appear explicitly or implicit, direct or indirect. Some people, some political parties, for example, they may not be talking about it directly, but they may infuse it indirectly or speak implicitly about that. But we know below the surface, there is some kind of religious agenda as well. However, this is also interesting to look at this. The use of religion in political discourse occurs because there is a space for that, provided by constitution, provided by historical and political structure. Okay, so that is a very important point. However, let's say that the environment, that is the environment to promote religiosity is not present. Instead, we have a secular environment that prevails, like in Singapore. Singapore is a secular state. But still, I would argue that religiosity may flourish and grow well as well in that particular environment. Maybe some people would say whenever you have a secular environment, you might curtail the growth of religions or the practice of religion. Actually, the fact is, in the secular environment, there is still space for religiosity or for religions to grow and to be practiced at the best as possible. You can see this in the context of Singapore, for example. The secular environment is happened because secular environment provides the space for religious freedom and thus accorded people with freedom to be religious or otherwise, sorry for the spelling, but you can be, give people the freedom to choose whatever religion, including do not have a religion as well. Okay, so that is the secular environment. So in the context of being Muslim in the secular environment, you can be as good as possible Muslims, but at the same time living in the secular environment. So you do not necessarily living in the Islamic environment, therefore you can be the best. Well, therefore you can be the best Muslim even though you are in Las Vegas, for example. But you can be the worst type of Muslim if you're living in Mecca, for example. So it is not about the environment per se, it's also about who you are. Actually, that is very important. Now that is number 3. Now I come to number 4. I think this is where the aim is, Islam as a soft power for the state. And I think if you can understand simply the word soft power, is a power to persuade, to influence, and to invite people to do or to think the way you want, and opposed to hard power, there is power to force, to coerce certain people to follow what you think. So the external use of religiosity to enhance state prestige and diplomacy and influence, I think this is what is happening. It can be used. Religiosity means that it can be used to enhance state prestige and can be used as the tool of diplomacy and to gain influence. Of course, it also can be used to counteracting to Islamophobia, for example, or radicalization of violent extremism. Let me show the example. Recently, for example, I participated as part of the panels in this discussion. The Prime Minister said Islamophobia being countered through Malaysia Madani. So the Prime Minister's office organized an international forum on Islamophobia. And I was one of the speakers here. You can see this, the meaningful engagement through Madani discourse. That was the theme. So if we can see this, Madani is the product of the newly established government recently, but it has been used as a way to counteract with the Islamophobia in this context. And of course, with the presence of the international audience too. So therefore, instrumentalizing religions to enhance this interested relation is something which is really happening and important for certain states. Of course, it can be used as a tool in trade relation, in diplomacy, in conflict resolution. And if you look at Malaysia's role in the peace process in the region, in the context of the Southern Philippines, for example, yes, one of the important components in that peace process is we are part of the brothers. So that was the narrative. We are part of the Nusantara. That was the narrative. Therefore, let us find some common ground. Let us solve this problem amicably. We don't have to go on fighting and destroying the state in the process. So that is one of the examples. And in the context of Madani approach and foreign relation, definitely people in the foreign ministry this time, they have to digest the concept, the Madani approach, in order to project, in order to translate these values and infuse them with foreign policy. So these are I would say, the glocalization of religious identity, meaning that you can be global, but at the same time rooted deeply in the local context. So external influence to religious discourse in Malaysia also visible, as you can see, in the context of Salafism, the presence of the Salafi movement in the country. For example, Muslim Brotherhood, well, including the Shiism from Iraq, also to make a headway into Malaysian society, and of course, including from other religions too. And we also can see the presence of the renowned scholars and preachers from outside Malaysia at this moment. I mean, for the past few months, I had seen that the influx of the scholars from Middle East and preachers from outside, from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, having a special guest in the Prime Minister's residence in Putra Jaya. So this is a part of the, the religious element in the Malaysia's foreign relation. And also, of course, we have as well the education diplomacy, a continuous education engagement with the Malaysian students were sent in the Middle East and so on, and harsh diplomacy in the context of Saudi Arabia. So that is number 4. So my final point is this. Our concern is, it's not about to what extent religion has been instrumental in as for being used as a soft power. I think we have to skip that part and to ask this question: which version that you're talking, which version of religion that you're talking about? Because we know by now that the role of religion in forming identity and politics is an undeniable fact. So our concern should be which version of religion that they are promoting. For example, the mainstream peaceful Islam or radical deviated form of Islam, such as what being promoted by ISIL, by Al-Qaeda, or by Jama'ah Islami. Just now we heard Dr. Noorhaidi was talking about something which is disrupting the equilibrium. Okay, so those deviation, for example, the ideology by ISIL, by Al-Qaeda, and Jama'ah Islami, was one of the examples, disrupting the equilibrium. So what comes to my mind when Dr. Noorhaidi was talking about the equilibrium is that, what does that mean? I mean, what are the equilibrium force that are present in that, which hold this country together? Because he said, when there is a disruption to the mainstream, there is a counter-reacting, therefore is going to stabilize things. We have to identify this. they only reinforce and to leverage on it to strengthen. So that is the question that we should ask. Which version of religion that we are talking about, or which version of a belief system that we're talking about? Because we can see this, I call politicization of Islam, that is to use Islam as an instrument for political gain, just like what the ISIS, the Al-Qaeda did, or JI did. So the extreme version of religion and politics, not necessarily religion, may lead to radicalization. It may generate political tension, whether it is ethnic or religious, especially in the multiracial society. So there is a certain control that we need to put in place, and the violence, it may generate the violence. I think I heard recently that the government of Singapore banned certain preachers because of the bringing the certain controversial issues. Maybe it is to the outsider, this is not the right position. But in the view of the state has a responsibility to ensure the stability of the nation. In the word of Dr. Noorhaidi, is equilibrium. If there is disruption by the introduction of the new ideas, or radical ideas, for example, it may disrupt it. It may, create an imbalance in society. Therefore, it creates tension, unnecessarily tension. So, and this is also may generate as a counter-radicalization and in others as a response. For example, right wings. I think we can see this thing. And there is an increased rise of Islamophobia and xenophobia. And then it has a spillover effect throughout the region and global. So this is what we're going to prevent. My final conclusion is very simple, ladies and gentlemen. Why Islam become part of the identity or vital for Malaysian politics is because of at least 4 factors. Because it's part of the identity. Islam shaped the identity of the people. Because of the belief system, Islam itself, that we have in Malaysian political system, and is constitutionally supported and guaranteed in them. And of course, number 4 is the national interest for the sake of the nation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think that's all for now, and I give back to the moderators. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad, for the inspiring presentation. We have now come to the Q&A sessions. We have here a couple of questions coming in already. Maybe one from Ranita. Let's start with a question for Prof. Noorhaidi Hasan regarding the current equilibrium of Islamism in Indonesia. With the rise of Islamic orthodoxy, Puritanism through soft power, through soft propagation, members of conservative Islamist groups are currently occupying the political parties and Indonesian parliament with the impression that they are working hand in hand with the Indonesian democracy. So, Prof, do you foresee any upcoming counter movement against such a soft, inconspicuous Islamist faction in Indonesian politics? How alarming are these Islamist revivalism movements to pluralism in Indonesia?
Should I answer right now?
Yes, please, Prof.
Yes, if we look at carefully what's going on in the Indonesian politics, actually the strengths of conservative, militant, radical groups are no longer significant. Yeah? They are still existing in the Indonesian politics, but look at, for instance, some parties that accommodated militant or conservative people. Party of Justice and Prosperity. Now, even this party is also moving to the center, adopting the democracy in the democratic system in Indonesia. And also, we never heard over the last 5 years, they talk about the Sharia, the importance of the Sharia. This is evidence that they are moving to the centers. I don't see that we cannot overestimate the presence of conservative groups in the Indonesian politics today. Like I said before, they are still existing, but they are less and less significant. in influencing the Indonesian politics. Look at all the parties, mainstream parties under the ruling party leadership. Almost all parties in Indonesia now are following the direction from President Joko Widodo and the ruling party PDIP. Yes, it's quite influential, and they are very committed to to bring back the equilibrium in Indonesian Islam, emphasizing the importance of Islam Wasatiyah or Islam Rahmatan lil Alamin in Indonesian politics today. So what I understand is actually we don't see any longer the the challenge, the biggest challenge from the radical organizations or conservative groups in the Indonesian politics. They are now no longer able to maintain their influence, the sphere of their influence, to convince people about their political agenda and so on. There are, of course, various factors behind it: political consolidation among the elite, changing political context at the global and national and local context, and as well as the economic development in Indonesia. All of them are playing a role in bringing down the influence of conservative and radical groups. Anything left, Muhammad?
Okay, thank you, Prof. The next question is posed to Dr. Ahmad. Given the use of Islam by various political parties in government and in opposition, how has this affected Islamic discourse in Malaysia? How are people responding to the current state of Islamic discourse? Are people becoming more inclined to certain trends as a response?
I think this is a very good question, a very pertinent question. My response to that is this. The political discourse in Malaysia, in particular, and also in the other countries as well, is a kind of ever-changing phenomenon. It doesn't stick to one discourse and stay there forever. Maybe there is certain discourse which is unchanging. But when you talk about political discourse, it's always in response to certain content, certain issues which is taking place. Now let me give you one example. The recent election, for example, the recent event of politics in Malaysia, people were talking about the green wave, they call it. So the green wave is referring to the rise of Islamic political party, which is Parti Islam Malaysia, PAS, which is very conservative political party, and it has captured many parliamentary seats in parliament. Therefore, it become like the so-called the kingmaker in Malaysian politics. And it has a lot of followers. It has a lot of followings, and people respond to that very positively, responding to the discourse which is brought or promotes by us. What are the discourse or the narrative that prospect? That is to bring back Islam, the Malay supremacy, or the Malay should rule the country, and we have to protect our religion, we have to protect our nation. So that kind of narrative, the people respond to that. I'm not talking about the elder generation. I'm talking about the young generation in urban and rural area. They are responding to that very positively, to the discourse. Now they become, of course, they do not capture the national politics that become a part of the government today, but they hold a certain key states in this country. So maybe to some people, this is the kind of a disruption to the mainstream or the equilibrium. I agree to some extent. It's a kind of disruption. It may raise a concern to some people. People, they would say this is a kind of conservative version of the political discourse, and it also represents a kind of radical view, intolerance view of people. They don't subscribe to the peaceful coexistence and so on. Maybe that was what they perceived the green wave looked like. However, when you look at the current situation, I can see that the disruption that we are talking about has returned to normal. And I think if I want to use Dr. Noorhaidi, I know, Dr. Noorhaidi, I like the word that you're using, it's equilibrium here. The situation has been restored to the balance. Now we have achieved equilibrium. Of course, there is a continuous disruption. But my quick response to that is people responding to the certain political trend positively before. But right now, they return back to normal. The equilibrium is currently restored, I would say. Why it is being restored? Because that constitutes the mainstream and majority view of the people. We do not want conflict. We do not want confrontation. We want peaceful coexistence. We want to live together on the piece of land which is blessed by God, and therefore we got to continue our life as normal. I think that is the idea that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad, for your response. The next question is addressed to Bapak Noorhaidi. What are your views on how Muslims in Indonesia view the initiatives of the US and the recent China initiative of China in the Middle East? Prof. Noorhaidi, please.
Yes, actually, the position of Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern countries in defining the legitimate and appropriate version of Indonesian Islam has become less and less important. Because I said before, so many change happen at the global and national context. If you ask me about the influence of the Middle East, for instance, the Saudi Arabia, it would become like, I saw also in the chat that there is a question how have change in Saudi Arabia affected Islam in Indonesia. The answer would be, it is not only because of the rise of Muhammad bin Salman to the power that changed the constellation between Saudi Arabia and Indonesia. It had happened before, especially after 9/11. You know, shortly after 9/11, we understand that the world started their campaigns against radicalism and terrorism, and also, you know, Saudi Arabia, United States, please funding organization and some foundation in Saudi Arabia, and it stops the opportunity for some people in Saudi Arabia to flow their money to Indonesian people, especially the Salafis, for instance. This happened since, let's say, 2003, 2004, and the Salafis and the conservative group in Indonesia can no longer rely on their funding to maintain their expansion and the very existence in Indonesia. So when they do no longer any possibility, they have the possibility to maintain their privilege to the Middle East, for instance. I think anything happen in the Middle East is no longer really, you know, their concern. Even the United States or China try to intervene in the Saudi Arabian politics or in the Middle East, for instance, they invested money and everything in the Middle East. So for Indonesian people today, because they have less and less importance with that part of the world, so mostly they do not care about that. But when they see that there is a growing interest among them with what's going on in Saudi Arabia, for instance, or other Middle Eastern countries, they would what is that? They would promote again their concerns, and they talk a lot about what happened in the Middle East. So I think this is related very much with what happened in Indonesia. What we see today, actually, Indonesia has the aspiration to use religion as its power instrument. It was like the past, yeah. A couple of years ago, during SBY presidency, Indonesian government tried to be offering Indonesian Islam as the model for the rest of the Muslim world. But today, I think Islam is used more as a kind of as a tool to consolidate the politics inside Indonesia. So that is what I want to say.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Noorhaidi, for the response. Now the next question is addressed to both speakers. The question is, how significant is the role of external influences in shaping Islam in each country? In Malaysia, for example, certain NGOs are inspired by the Muslim Brotherhood, but these organizations have been localized to local context. Maybe Dr. Ahmad, you would like to start first with the Malaysian case? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. My response to this question is, the significance of the external influence in shaping the Islam in Malaysia, especially in the context of the NGOs and also, for example, Muslim Brotherhood. I agree that there is an interplay between the external forces outside Malaysia and also inside Malaysia. I'm not saying that there is a one-sided effect or one-side influence. There is a kind of interplay, meaning that we are able to influence others. We are able to influence certain things, a certain agenda in the context, in our context, in relation with other countries, and they also responded appropriately. So there is an interplay between these two situations or the two forces. That's number one. Number two, when certain influence are present in the certain context, for example, in Malaysia, of course, they go through certain kind of, I would say, a culturalization, or they need to be customized according to the local context. So we can find that most NGOs, even though they were inspired by whatever ideology that they have. For example, Muslim Brotherhood, they are forced to be contextualized. They are forced to be contextualized according to the local context if they want to function effectively. Well, if they don't want to function effectively, that's fine. I mean, we also have certain group which is outside Malaysia coming over here and try to make an impact. For example, Jamaah Islamiyah brought a certain Salafism ideology and to be spread, but only small community. That's why it doesn't take hold, I mean, for the entire society. If you want to function more effectively, you have to be contextualized according to the local context. I think this is what I have seen many NGOs, even though they were inspired by the external forces, by whatever ideology or movement outside, it needs to be contextualized according to the local context. That's my response to that. Thank you.
Yes, Prof. Noorhaidi, would you like to address the same question?
To my opinion, actually, the dynamic of Indonesian Islam, or also that seems true for Malaysian Islam, for instance, is very much about the internal contestation involving multiple actors inside the country to claim their interpretation, their version of interpretation of Islam as the right one. So if particular groups successfully claims that version of Islam, the version of the interpretation of Islam, actually they can get more and more influence on power relation, on the politics, on economic axis, social structures, and so on. That's why people here from different groups will be positioning themselves along the line of the contestation. When they are already settled in the kind of the map of Indonesian Islam, they would be happy. Nothing happened with them. They will continue practicing their religion and so on. But on certain times, global circumstance change. Politics in the world change. International relations also change, and this will disturb the existing social structures, political hierarchy, economic privilege, and so on. And with this destruction of the existing position of these groups, of course, they will react against that. in order to react and maintain, accordingly try to maintain their existing position, they would get some inspiration, some legitimacy from the ideas coming from outside the country. Let's say Ikhwanul Muslimin, Salafi, and other Puritan interpretation of Islam. When they came to Indonesia, this idea, of course, there are some certain group that feel this is suitable for their understanding and interpretation of Islam, and will give them benefit more for their political and economic interests. That is actually what I understand about the dynamic of Indonesian Islam. It is not so much about how certain foreign influences come to Indonesia and try to instill their norms and their interpretation of certain religion. But there is a kind of dynamic, the interplay between global, local, national context, and also the active, the active engagement of the local national players in this contestation.
Thank you, Prof, for your response. There are no more questions posed by the participants, but we do have time, about 10 minutes. If I may, Prof. Noorhaidi, I would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
You mentioned in your presentation about Wasatiyah Islam, and I understand that is something that was enacted by MUI, Majlis Ulama Indonesia, in 2015, right? And you also promoted this concept of Islam Nusantara, right? In their Congress, and also Muhammadiyah, if I'm not mistaken, they have also proclaimed this concept of Islam berkemajuan, right? Progressive Islam. So we have Wasatiyah Islam, Islam Nusantara, Islam berkemajuan. So my question to you is, do you see any kind of a contestation or even conflation between these three forms of Islam in Indonesia? And how much impact or influence these forms of Islam has over the Indonesian population?
Yes, this is actually exactly what I'm going to say, to argue in this presentation. Like I said before, all parties or established organizations try to promote their understanding of Islam. They coin certain concepts like Islam Wasatiyah by the Nahdlatul Ulama, Islam berkemajuan by Muhammadiyah, because they need to voice their aspiration in the contestation. Otherwise, they might be marginalized in the shaping of future Indonesian Islam. Muhammadiyah feel a need to speak up about Islam berkemajuan because of Nahdlatul Ulama campaign for Islam Nusantara. Muhammadiyah did not want to let Nahdlatul Ulama alone in campaigning the appropriate version of Indonesian Islam. They challenge Nahdlatul Ulama interpretation by saying Islam berkemajuan is the appropriate one. But I think now they are achieving kind of consensus. All the established organizations, they use, I think, for more official purposes, Wasatiyah Islam, Wasatiyatul Islam, as the common ground to define the Indonesian Islam. So now everybody, every group has been happy, I think. In the political map of Indonesia today, you see Nahdlatul Ulama get some privilege, Muhammadiyah as well, MUI with the the appointment of the selection of Kiai Haji Ma'ruf Amin as the vice president. So I think everything has been settled. Yes, that's why I argue actually Indonesian Islam is now reaching a new equilibrium, and there is no much space left for a conservative, militant and radical organization. It has been locked down by the mainstream players in the Indonesian Islam.
Thank you, Prof. maybe if I can, I would like to ask Dr. Ahmad on a similar question that I've just asked Prof. Noorhaidi. Because Dr. Ahmad, you mentioned also about these different forms of Islam in Malaysia. You mentioned about the project of Islamization by Mahathir, and then Ahmad Badawi with his Islam Hadari, and today Islam Madani. So the question is, how much impact of these various forms of Islam has over the entire Malaysian population? And if I can ask another question about, maybe you can provide some insight for us on the so-called the current situation of Salafism or Salafi thoughts in Malaysia. Dr. Ahmad, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Muhammad. There are 2 points I would like to make here regarding the to what extent the impact of this Islamic project financed by the government. One is the specific effect or specific outcome or implication that we can see immediately. When Prime Minister introduced certain initiative, for example, let's take Madani approach.
Yeah.
The moment Prime Minister opened his mouth and talks about Madani approach, everybody in the government and every newspapers, the mainstream newspapers, was talking about it. You can see the impact and you can see the reaction immediately. There are the accessibility to funding for research, for example, on this area. There are some kind of governments who are organizing conferences, workshop, and talks. The policy were enacted, which is actually tailored according to the Madani approach. That you can see the impact of this very immediately. Same goes to when during Badawi's time, you consider similar effect. And this time also similar effect immediately. Second point is a cumulative effect, meaning that it is cumulatively, you can see that they sustain the presence of Islamic component in the government's policy. And the presence of the Islamic component and the Islamic values in the government policy is done by design, of course. And because of the grassroots demand, and because it is, as I said, it is very close to every people on the grassroots, the constituent, the voters. They need to see this kind of thing being on the government's agenda. You cannot become government if you do not have this element. If you take away the Islamic agenda from the government's policy initiative, immediately you will be unpopular. So I think this is very, very important point. And the second point is talking about the insight and the current scenario of the Salafism in Malaysia.
Sure.
I would say in the past, what I mean in the past is from, I would say, maybe from the year 2000, the year 2010, from the 2010 until 2020, we can see the impact of Salafism. I think it's because of the returns of the Saudi-based education to Malaysia, and also because of the continuous support. I think in the word that you're using, the soft power of Islam from the Middle East being invested to NGOs and being invested to the preachers coming to Malaysia and also bring them to the Middle East. The sustainable relationship like this has a certain impact to the discourse of Salafism in this country. And therefore, I would, when I involved in de-radicalization program, for example, one of the biggest challenge would say how to counter the Salafi thoughts among the detainees. That was before. However, right now, I think the Salafi movement has slowed down. Why I say it is slowed down? One indicator is the many Salafi scholars do not make extensive or more present in the social media. They do not want to push this Salafi thought, talking about the issue of bid'ah, talking about the issue of this is the Tawhid Tiga, and this is Bid'ah, this is, we cannot celebrate this, we cannot celebrate. It is no longer a popular discourse, and they do not push this kind of idea on the board in the society anymore. If we compare with maybe 3 years ago, 5 years ago, yes, there is a debate between this. One is the moderate group mainstream, and the other one is the Salah. So that's my quick response.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad, for the wonderful response. All right, it's 3:30 now. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of today's webinar on soft power, Islam and religiosity, localization of Islam in Southeast Asia. So, on behalf of the SRP and RSS, we like to express our deep appreciation to both speakers, to Dr. Ahmad and Dr. Noorhaidi, for spending this afternoon with us and to share your thoughts and perspectives on the topic of our webinar today. And we also like to thank all participants for your attendance and for your questions as well. So finally, I would like to also take this opportunity to wish all our Muslim friends Selamat Hari Raya Adil Adha. Today is the eve of Hari Raya Haji, right? In Malaysia, in Indonesia as well, right? Yeah. So, once again, thank you to both speakers and everyone for attending this webinar. Thank you and good evening.